Major issues, high stakes, a heated race for the White House.
I've never been more optimistic about our future.
This vote is going to be the most important vote you've ever cast.
In California, generational change in both chambers, an expensive Senate race pitting a seasoned Democrat against a Republican newcomer.
Let's go on and win this thing. On to November, everybody.
We haven't come this far to only go this far.
2 House seats open for the first time in decades. We speak to the candidates hoping to fill some massive shoes. The countdown is on to November 5th.
Kind of a rolling thunder headed into what is looking to be the most important election since 1860.
KTVU presents The Race to November.
Good evening and welcome to the Race to November. I'm Greg Lee. Over the next hour, we will show you the final results from California's March primary, the trends that drove voters, and look ahead to November 5th. We are less than 200 days from Election Day, headlined by a highly consequential race for the White House. We'll also take a closer look at the candidates vying for some rare open congressional seats here in the Bay Area. At the top of the ticket, we are set for a rematch between President Biden and former President Trump, both the presumptive nominees for their parties. The two men dominated in California's primary, Mr. Trump notching more than 79% of the Republican vote and easily taking all 169 delegates. In the Democratic primary, President Biden cruised to victory with more than 89% of the vote in a big Super Tuesday for his re-election campaign. He received 424 delegates towards the nomination from the Golden State.
It's a spoiler for the war machine. It's a spoiler for Wall Street and Big Ag and Big Tech.
The polling margins between Trump and Biden have been razor thin, especially in some key swing states, which means a third-party candidate could be a spoiler for Democrats and Republicans. Robert Kennedy Jr. is drawing criticism and concern from both major parties as he tries to get on states' ballots as an independent candidate. He named his vice presidential pick, Oakland native and wealthy tech entrepreneur Nicole Shanahan. The Republican National Committee will hold its convention in Milwaukee July 15th through the 18th, where Mr. Trump is expected to be formally selected as the party's nominee and adopt its party platform. Democrats will follow with their own convention in Chicago, August 19th to the 22nd. President Biden expected to be formally named his party's nominee. While a Biden-Trump contest seems inevitable, polling shows a majority of voters do not want a rematch, and the lack of excitement and competition resulted in some low turnout numbers for California's primary. According to the Secretary of State, 7.7 million people voted. That's about 35% of registered voters. For a closer look at the turnout numbers in California and what they could mean moving forward into the general election, I spoke to Paul Mitchell, data expert and CEO of Political Data Inc.
35% in this March primary. We had seen returns be very slow early on, and we kind of ended up in a low turnout for presidential. Tell me what you glean from these statistics.
Yeah, so presidential elections generally are higher turnout. Primaries can fluctuate a lot depending on how exciting or interesting that election is. So in an election like 2016, we had sky-high turnout, especially among younger voters. Same thing in 2020, a lot of Latino and younger voters who traditionally don't turn out as much in primaries, turning out because of Bernie Sanders or because of the excitement about the election. In this election cycle, the Republican primary was basically done by the time voters in California started getting ballots. At least ostensibly, it was kind of closing up. It seemed pretty clear that Donald Trump, after winning Iowa and New Hampshire, was going to be the nominee. And on the Democratic side, there was really no primary election. There were Democrats on the ballot, but none were actually campaigning for president at that point. So that means that it kind of takes the air out of the primary election for a lot of voters. There's just not a real reason to vote that top of the ticket. And as a result, you end up with an electorate that in situations like this in California are generally going to be older, whiter, and more conservative as a function of that.
We've seen lots of polling, Paul, that people aren't terribly thrilled about this presidential matchup between former President Trump and President Biden. As we get closer to November, obviously there are a number of important issues that voters are thinking about, but could we see those things drive them to the polls and see the turnout we would expect in a presidential?
Yeah, and I think that's the right word. I think we would expect high turnout in this general election, even though we had low turnout in the primary. And there's a great recent example of this. In 2012, we had the same situation where Obama was running for re-election, so there was no Democratic primary. And we had a June primary where Mitt Romney was already the nominee for the Republicans, so really not a lot of reason for Republicans to turn out. We saw really low, record low turnout in that election cycle as well, as around 32%, so even lower than this election. Yet by the time we got to November, turnout was sky high in 2012. And one of the things we're seeing and a lot of researchers are looking into in the way that our electorate has changed in the last several years, especially since Trump has, ever since he came down that escalator, is that you have what they call reverse polarization, meaning voters are polarized and enthusiastic about not just voting for their person, but voting against somebody else. So it'd kind of be like if the thing that got, baseball fans in the seats at a Giants game was their absolute hate of the Dodgers more than their love of the Giants. And so that's what we're seeing in elections nowadays, is this pushing of turnout and excitement and enthusiasm based on how much they dislike the other team or other party or other candidate, more so than just love of their own. So when we see data saying that, maybe a lot of Republicans are kind of hesitant about the trials, or maybe a lot of Democrats are less enthusiastic about an older Joe Biden. The reality is that we see election after election, these voters still do turn out because they have that reverse polarization. They are so against the other side.
There was only one statewide measure on the March ballot. Proposition 1 sets aside $6.4 billion to overhaul California's mental health system. The bond measure, backed by Governor Newsom, passed narrowly by 50.2% to 49.8%. The money will go toward building 10,000 beds in housing for people experiencing serious mental health illnesses. It also reworks a tax for mental health services. The unexpected close margin surprised some and sent a message to the governor,
which is a recognition of the cynicism that's out there that just spending more money somehow is going to solve a problem. I share that cynicism. That's why this reform is a completely different dynamic.
Under Prop 1, counties will be required to use 30% of the state funds for housing programs for the homeless. Still ahead, the race to replace Congresswoman Anna Eshoo with its many twists and turns. We speak to the candidates. And the marquee matchup of the primary shifts into a two-man contest. It's Garvey versus Schiff for the Senate. A look at how we got here.
Thank you. And let's go on and win this thing. On to November, everybody.
We haven't come this far to only go this far.
The marquee race of the March primary, the contest to fill the Senate seat long held by the late Dianne Feinstein. Once votes were counted, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff and former professional baseball player and Republican Steve Garvey advanced to the November general election. Schiff, the frontrunner in this race, spent millions elevating Garvey's profile during the primary. The strategy criticized by other Democrats in the race, but it worked, and he'll face off against a political newcomer in Garvey.
We feel great. We ran, I think, a really strong campaign, and I think our message of delivering for California, of putting results over rhetoric, of being willing to lead in the tough fights for our democracy, but also looking for opportunities to get things done, to bring down housing costs, to bring down child care costs. I think that resonated, and I think there's a message for other Democrats around the country here that we need to move away from just the performative politics, the emphasis on how many views you can get, how many clicks you can get, as opposed to how much good you can do.
Spending in this primary race dwarfed previous Senate races. In fact, according to Ad Impact, it was the most expensive in state history. Garvey, for his part, will try to become the first Republican to win a Senate race in California since 1988.
What you are all feeling tonight is what it's like to hit a walk-off home run. Kind of like San Diego in '84. Because the networks have called it. We're going on to the general election to face off against Adam Schiff.
Well, we feel good about where we are right now. I'll say tonight it's the first game of a doubleheader. The second game is going to be daunting.
This is the first open U.S. Senate contest in California since 2016. Spending expected to continue to pick up between Schiff and Garvey. The latest campaign finance reports show each raised more than $3 million between February 15th and March 31st. Schiff, though, working with a war chest nearly 3 times the size of Garvey's. No matter who wins the Senate seat in November, California will not have a female senator for the first time since 1992. That is just one of the generational shifts in California politics. Bay Area voters will see some fresh faces in the House for the first time in decades.
When Bay Area voters head to the polls in November, they will see a changing of the guard. Longtime Bay Area representatives either retiring or running for new offices and taking with them decades of experience.
That's a lot of brain power. People know who the district, know how to get things done in Congress. We're losing that.
It began with Congresswoman Jackie Speer, who chose not to run for her seat in 2022 after 15 years in the House. Oakland Representative Barbara Lee ran for Senate, vacating the position she's held for 26 years. And Silicon Valley Congresswoman Anna Eshoo will retire after 32 years in Congress.
Representing really what I think is the most distinguished congressional district in the country has just been the honor of my life.
Eshoo was first elected in 1992 in what was dubbed the Year of the Woman. 47 women were elected to the House, 24 for the first time, and women won an additional 4 seats in the Senate. Among them, the late Senator Dianne Feinstein, who served 31 years in the upper chamber.
The representation is so important because now we have more African American women, we have gay women, we have Hispanic women, we have Native American women, and you know, their voices are so important.
We are losing a huge generation of seniority, and especially in the U.S. Senate, seniority is everything. So California is definitely going to be, we're not going to have those impact players.
While the candidates running for these rare open seats may be novices in Congress, Eshoo says they all bring their own valuable perspective.
There's a variation of experience, some in local government, some local government, and combined with work in the state legislature, some never having held public office, but have done wonderful things in their lives.
The Bay Area has had a long-standing relationship with a lot of its politicians. The names are very familiar, household names, but there comes a transition.
A transition that could potentially define a new era.
33% of House members from California are women, and there's a possibility that could shrink to even smaller numbers. And more than half of the voters are women. So this is going to be a loss of female power. It very well could be.
As the age of politicians continues to come under scrutiny, some experts say the open positions represent an opportunity.
I've always believed that it's important to bring in newer thinking, younger people, and I think that's basically what a lot of people are craving in politics now.
As voters weigh in on who will fill these giant shoes, Eshoo has this advice for the next generation.
Number one, put country first. Always put your country first, our country first. Don't vote out of fear.
Eshoo points out when she first ran, there were 32 women in Congress. Now there are 151.
A rare open Bay Area congressional seat, this time in the East Bay. Barbara Lee set to move on. We speak to the 2 women hoping to replace her. Plus, a tie, a recount, and a coveted position in the Silicon Valley. No shortage of drama in District 16.
I'm not slacking off, and I wouldn't. I'm not even tempted to, because my constituents deserve my full energy right to the end of this Congress.
Silicon Valley Congresswoman Anna Eshoo working right until the end of her term and a political career that has spanned decades. The race to replace her, one of the most dramatic in California electoral history. Sam Liccardo came in first, and in second, a tie between Evan Lowe and Joe Simitian. All 3 were going to advance to the general election, a first in the state's top 2 primary system. Then a recount was requested by Jonathan Padilla. a former Lardo staffer. Lardo's team said they are not associated with Padilla, and it has resulted in criticism and even a complaint with the Federal Election Commission. While the registrar's offices in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties work to iron out the results, we felt it important to hear from all three possible candidates for this prominent seat. We begin with first place finisher Sam Lardo.
These are massive shoes to fill. So how do you go about, if you were elected, filling those shoes?
Yeah, Congresswoman Eshoo has been tremendous, and I actually worked as a volunteer on that very first campaign that she prevailed in. Actually, another volunteer is pretty well known, is a fellow by the name of Ed Lee, former mayor of San Francisco. So I think she took pride knowing that she had a couple mayors volunteering for her. Look, there's no question it's going to take time in Congress to be able to establish, the relationships and the seniority. Obviously, we know how Congress operates and how it has operated for the last couple centuries. You've got to pay the dues and build relationships and work your way through committees. I'm committed to doing that. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and work hard. And I know that Congresswoman Eshoo was so good at dealing with the community, and I'll learn some lessons from her, and I've got some experience of my own. I'm confident that one way or another, folks are going to feel like they're getting their money's worth and their tax dollars from my office and from me, because we're going to work hard for them.
How do you work across the aisle in that way?
Well, I've had a lot of experience doing that as mayor. When you are mayor, you don't have the luxury of saying we couldn't get anything done because of that blankety blank other party. You actually have to be accountable for results. Every time I'm in a grocery store, at the gym, I would hear from residents telling me about every homeless encampment, every burglary, every pothole, whatever it might be, and people expect you to respond. I think that having that mayor's mindset going to Congress is helpful in reaching across the aisle, because you no longer have the sort of safe feeling of, we'll just follow the party line, and if we don't get anything done, so be it. You actually have to reach across the aisle to get anything done in this Congress. It's a divided Congress. It's going to remain that way. And I think there's an opportunity for younger members of Congress maybe to start to build that bipartisan muscle that is atrophied for a couple decades in Congress. The book I wrote, it's really about how we can actually get some votes on both sides of the aisle to tackle these big challenges like homelessness and high costs of living and crime and protecting reproductive rights, all those issues that we know there's a lot of agreement between Democrats and Republicans on. So it's just a matter of us actually taking the risk to work together.
You introduced solutions like tiny homes, quick build apartments. Housing was really at the center of that proposed solution, and I know it is for you moving forward, but how does Congress help with that?
Well, there's a lot that Congress can do, and frankly, we haven't really seen Congress step up as if this were a national crisis, which it is. We know we have our own acute challenges with homelessness here in the Bay Area, but the reality is there are 44 cities in this country that have more than 1,000 unhoused residents. This is a national crisis, and it requires a federal response, and I hear it from mayors throughout the country. Now, what we were able to do successfully in San Jose was find innovative ways of getting people housed more quickly. We started, for example, converting motels back in 2015 and 16, years before it became a statewide policy in California. That was modestly successful. We obviously needed a lot more resources, and I'm glad the governor ultimately came in with more resources. What we really landed on as a solution that was able to scale was around using prefabricated housing and rapidly deploying that. The challenge is that we have a federal system based on a housing voucher that is frankly too rigid, that does not enable local communities like San Jose and now Mountain View and Redwood cities that have really invested in this transitional housing, this prefabricated housing can be built much more quickly at a much lower cost to get more people off the street. And we can't use federal vouchers to fund any of those operations or to get any people off the street who might have those vouchers. And those vouchers are critical to pay for the operations of those kinds of facilities or to pay rent to a landlord. And we have a federal government that doesn't understand how it can better partner with local communities.
Party of two or three, the complicated and contentious contest to face Lardo in the general election. We speak to the challengers. Well, Welcome back to the race for November. Our coverage of the race for District 16 continues. Santa Clara County Supervisor Joe Simitian has also served as a state senator, an assembly member, and a mayor. He said he's ready to bring his experience to the House and provide a fresh approach to solutions.
Held many positions in your career. Why Congress now?
I think we are at an extraordinary time in this country. I talk to too many folks who are worried about the ability of our institutions to respond to 21st century challenges. I talk to too many folks who are worried about the very survival of American democracy. I think this is a time when good people have to step up. And you know, when good people walk away, the bad guys win.
If elected, she has endorsed you. What do you hope to bring to fill those shoes or to carry on her legacy?
Well, Anna has endorsed my campaign, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, and I appreciate that because she clearly knows the issues, she knows the district, and she knows what it takes to get the job done in Washington. I think her emphasis on health care, she's the senior Democrat on the health care subcommittee, is an important role that we have to make sure we don't lose when she steps down and retires. I have chaired our county's health and hospital committee. In the last 10 years have literally cut the number of uninsured folks in our county in half. People said we couldn't get it done. We got it done. And there are people out there who have health care today because we made the effort. There are big, tough challenges out there. And I think people have lost hope that we can tackle those challenges successfully. My experience, the work I've done, indicates you can if you're determined, willing to work across the partisan aisle from time to time, and prepared to stand up and speak out and push back when you have to.
How do you break through that if elected and make sure there is some common ground to get work done for the American people?
Look, I've done this before. As a member of the California State Senate, I wrote the bill that created the most ambitious renewable energy requirements anywhere in the country, right here in California. And I got that done on a bipartisan basis because I was able to work with folks on both sides of the aisle and talk to them about why it was good for them and their district and the folks they represented. And we need more of that.
Also, some of that work you have done as a county supervisor was about saving affordable housing. What can the federal government do for homelessness and housing, particularly in the 16th district?
Well, the federal government has a kind of a 20th century attitude about a 21st century problem. There's still, you know, the folks at HUD, Housing and Urban Development, still see things as if it were post-World War II rather than well into the 21st century. So we've got to make sure that at every level, whether it's more vouchers, more flexibility for vouchers, opportunity to retain affordable housing that already exists. I had the last mobile home park in Palo Alto was slated for the bulldozers, frankly, and I looked at 117 families, 400 folks who were going to be out on the street, affordable housing loss. So I tried to partner with the folks at the Housing Authority, the Federal Housing Authority, and they said, well, you know, we don't do mobile home parks. And I said, well, maybe it's time to start. And ultimately we got a three-way deal that kept 400 folks from being evicted, that kept 117 units of affordable housing. But it's going to take a mindset change back in Washington, and it's going to be incremental from time to time. You know, maybe it will be this program, that program, but the new ideas are definitely what folks in Washington are going to do. And so, as so often is the case, they come from here in Northern California.
What makes you stand out from your opponent or opponents as we approach November here?
As I said earlier, I think folks are anxious about the state of the nation, and they want somebody who isn't going to go and collect seniority for the next 10 years. They don't want someone who's going to be a potted plant, just another 435th member of the Congress. They want somebody who's been there, done that, and knows how to get the work done. And I've demonstrated that as a member of the California State Senate, now as a county supervisor, always looking ahead, always looking around the curve to say, what does the future require of us? And that's the kind of representative I've been, and that's the kind of representative I'll be in Congress. I think that's what folks are looking for.
Assemblymember Evan Lowe has served in that state legislature role since 2014. Prior to that, he was the mayor and a city council member in Campbell. He says he'll bring a fresh perspective to Washington.
You have served in many roles in public service in your career. So why Congress now?
Well, I'm excited about this opportunity, Greg, to continue the service from being mayor and city council at a local level, completing my 10th year in the California state legislature, and the natural transition at the federal level. It's time for a new generation of leadership in getting past the type of partisanship, but also the partnership of results as well, too. And I'm excited about this opportunity.
Anna Eshoo leaves behind quite the legacy and will leave behind quite the legacy. How do you hope to fill her shoes or continue her legacy or make it your own?
Well, I think that's a fair question to ask. Number one, to recognize the importance of the statespersonship that Anna Eshoo has provided. Also understanding the importance of seniority, and then seniority matters in Congress. It's until seniority that you're not able to be in key committee positions, understanding the lay of the land, and actually delivering fiscal issues directly impacting our local districts. And that is what's so necessary in this period of time. And so in that regard, look, either one of us will be starting as freshmen. So let's not fool ourselves about anything of that nature. But that's why a long tenure, a long runway is important. But also when you think about the face of what the next generation of leadership looks like, I'm hopeful that I can answer that call to service while also demonstrating that I've delivered in the state capitol and at the local level as well.
Evan, you have broken many barriers in your career. How has that and your personal life, the influence your parents have had, how has that shaped the kind of leader and the legislator that you are?
Greg, the personal experiences, I think, matters to how we approach governance, which is that of a number of different attributes. There's never been a Chinese American ever elected in the history of the country from Northern California, yet Asian Pacific Islanders are the largest demographic here in the Bay Area. Similarly, there's never been an openly LGBT person elected to Congress from Northern California, even though here in the Bay Area, we have more LGBT families than any other place in the country. And I say that because it's not just about empty tokenism, but the values that we provide. How do we address these issues of keeping our community safe and stopping Asian hate? How do we make sure that we're combating the attacks of the most vulnerable on reproductive freedom and those individuals that feel so attacked at the national level as well within the LGBT community? And those are the type of personal experiences that are provided.
How can Congress assist with housing and homelessness, especially in the Bay Area?
Well, this is a multi-pronged approach with tackling the issue of housing. Of course, this is a local issue. State helps to assist on the funding and providing the policies that allow local municipalities to be effective in actually building and doing the approvals. And of course, the fiscal from that of the federal government. We've seen a decrease, unfortunately, with vouchers from housing and urban development. And it is important that we address the issue directly impacting the Bay Area. We know that the cost of living is disproportionately impacting us here in the Bay Area and frankly in California in comparison to the rest of the country. So how do we acknowledge these key facts and realizing that we must have strong leaders in Congress in key positions to deliver back to getting the resources to support the state, ultimately to the local level?
What sets you apart at the end of the day to the voter?
What sets me apart is that of the legislative record. I was named the most prolific lawmaker in Sacramento out of 120 in my tenure here in the state capitol, showing that I have delivered and I'll be a workhorse, oftentimes not easy. In this era of politicians and politics, oftentimes you'll see those that placate towards the media for the type of followers, but actually not getting things done. Congress is about getting things done.
After the break, our focus moves to the East Bay, the battle for District 12 and Barbara Lee's seat. Coming up, we'll speak to frontrunner Lateefah Simon.
People understand that I see them, I hear them, that I want to make their lives better.
East Bay Congresswoman Barbara Lee speaking to a crowd of supporters on primary night. The fixture of Oakland politics, ran for U.S. Senate this year, relinquishing the congressional seat she's held for 26 years. The champion of progressive values came in fourth in the race. As she looks to her next chapter, she's keeping a close eye on who will take her seat. Lee has endorsed the campaign of Lateefah Simon, a member of the BART Board of Directors. Simon earned 55% of the primary vote, far outpacing the other candidates. She will face Dr. Jennifer Tran, a professor at Cal State East Bay. We begin with Simon and her message to voters. Stephen, thanks for the time. Congratulations moving forward. Civil rights advocate, nonprofit leader, BART board member. So why run for Congress now?
You forgot mother, which is one of my I think, most important jobs. Why Congress? Because Barbara Lee and the amazing Ron Dellums, I mean, over 50 years of service representing this district. They, in their service, I believe, have changed the world from fighting for not only folks in this county, but shining the light on international relations, from pushing for a free South Africa to Barbara Lee being the lone vote to really shine a light on endless wars in this country. I didn't feel like I could sit at the sidelines as Barbara announced that she would be leaving her seat to run for the United States Senate. I've been serving in this community for 30 years and been fighting every single day for folks. This seat is too important to the people of the 12th Congressional District, and frankly, this seat is too important for the United States Congress. We need someone who's a progressive and someone who has proven that they actually can change material conditions for families who are struggling. I didn't want to sit at the sidelines, and so I dusted off my campaign boots and launched a campaign over a year ago, and here we are.
How do you carry on that legacy? How do you fill those shoes?
I have a lot to learn from Congresswoman Lee. In fact, she's taken me through the halls of Congress just a couple of weeks ago, introducing me to dozens of her colleagues, both Republican and Democrat. She's a stateswoman. She cares so much about really how we're living our lives here. The homelessness crisis, the crisis on safety. These are issues that she's been fighting for, again, over 3 decades. I have a lot to live up to, but I actually feel very, very confident in my ability to make relationships that actually encourage good legislating. You don't just come into Congress and say you got a big, great idea and it's gonna happen. You know, with 30 years of organizing experience and leading organizations, you know, Barbara endorsed my campaign because she actually knows, because she's a mentor of mine, she was my professor, that I get things done. And so keeping Miss Lee as a friend and an advisor, I have a lot of those in this community. I'm very interested in following in those footsteps and fighting hard to make sure that, again, the Bay Area has a fighting chance.
You and I know this is a Congress that hasn't been able to get things done. This is a Congress that is deeply divided. How do you go into that space and work through that polarization that we're seeing?
You know, I started working full-time in 1995, literally on the streets of the Tenderloin, fighting for young women and girls who were being sold in the underground street economy. I've created organizations and fought with government, whether they be progressives, moderates, or conservatives, to demand that victims of violent crime be seen and compensated and supported in their journeys to safety and security. I'm not afraid of Republicans. I'm not afraid of very difficult Democrats. I'm excited to go and fight for the folks that I care most about, and those are the folks in this district.
You've overcome a lot of hurdles and experiences in your life. How has that shaped you and the kind of leader and elected official that you are?
You know, at this very moment in the United States, there are millions of folks who are dragging themselves out of medical debt. I watched my husband die of cancer. He fought every single day so that at some point he could possibly watch his little girl grow up. Now, that didn't happen. I became a widow in my late 30s and cycling out of medical debt, raising my kids, putting one through college, putting the other one in kindergarten at the time. I've seen a lot. I've also been a young leader who fought for decades to get young people off the streets, you know, and into housing. I myself was a young woman, a teen mom. Again, I've had a lot of challenge, but it was really through institutions and good players in government that helped me change my trajectory. All of those lived realities have deeply informed the way that I work.
Calling for police reform, calling for allocation of funds, calling for defunding, calling for ways to reimagine what policing looks like. Your opponent has been critical of that and says in this moment, we need to fund those departments and fund local law enforcement. What is your response to that?
I love this question because it's somewhat of a misnomer that in my life, that I have called for defunding public agencies. When I campaigned for the office of BART director, I was very clear that we needed to expand our safety force. I came up with the notion that the BART Police Department, they had a lot of work to do. There are issues of homelessness and folks having mental health crises that we needed to expand that force by placing an ambassador force unique with our police department. I've done that. I work extremely close with our brass here in the Bay Area. I don't know one candidate in the race, even before the primary and now, who could say that they have active relationship with law enforcement. I've worked with over 58 counties as a special assistant and advisor to police reform with Gavin Newsom. In fact, because of the initiatives that I've put in place on Bay Area Rapid Transit, the 911 or response rate to crisis on BART within 5 counties is 4 minutes long.
It's been 25 years since the seat's been open, and we have a real chance to bring our diverse experiences and needs to DC.
After the break, Simon's fellow Democrat and opponent in this race sits down with us, her priorities as she makes her first run at elective office. Welcome back to the race to November. Dr. Jennifer Tran was born and raised in Oakland. In addition to teaching at Cal State East Bay, she's also the president of the Oakland Vietnamese Chamber of Commerce. She says she's ready to serve this district. You have never held elective office, so tell our viewers why you're running.
I'm running for Congress because we need to prioritize the local. The problems we have around public safety, around homelessness, and our struggling small businesses need a federal response. And it's been 25 years since the seat's been open, and we have a real chance to bring our diverse experiences and needs to DC to be able to address this in an urgent and timely manner.
I want to talk about the woman who is currently in that chair and who has held it for decades, Congresswoman Barbara Lee. She has quite the legacy of being a progressive champion. So how do you look to fill those shoes or carry on her legacy or make it your own?
Yes, I, as an ethnic studies professor who really values the importance of our histories, it's important to understand the legacy, particularly around anti-war and human rights. Protecting them is extremely important for me as an educator, but also as someone who is born and raised in Oakland and a daughter of refugees, and being able to take a hard stance on minimizing oppression and violence in our communities is something that I plan to continue both domestically and beyond.
I want to talk a little bit about your background. Vietnam War refugees, your parents were, you grew up in Oakland. This is home for you.
Born and raised, yes.
So what does it mean to you to know that you've been born and raised here, and how has that shaped who you are today and what your parents have been through?
Yes, well, my parents were refugees who had to flee their homeland because of political persecution, and like many refugees from Southeast Asia, from Central America, from other parts of the world, people come here because they have no other choice. And for me to be raised in Oakland is to grow up with other communities that have faced similar challenges and adversities around persecution, racial discrimination, poverty. And so having that experience firsthand allows me to speak to the issues very intimately, not only as a professional, but as a neighbor, as a resident. And I think that's extremely lacking given this moment that our communities are going through such hardships. And we really need a champion who is able to address those diverse needs.
If you are elected and you go into that space to DC, how do you work across the aisle to just get something done?
Yes. So you just asked me a question around my upbringing, my parents being refugees. The Vietnamese community is a community that is politically really heterogeneous, diverse. I mean, we have folks who are more progressive and folks who are more conservative. And like a household, it's really important to compromise, to create shared visions that are going to bring us into the future that we all want. And so in this race, it's extremely important for us to bring back balance and sensible solutions to the issues that we know are prevalent, and who is going to have a vision for that work. And yes, the current landscape is extremely divisive and polarizing, and being able to work across the aisle is something that I've been able to do, not only as an educator, but also the president of the Vietnamese Chamber of Commerce, working with small businesses and say, we live in the most diverse and progressive hubs in the country and maybe in the world. And it's important for us to continue to make sure that our decisions are bringing prosperity and opportunities to everyone.
In your first 100 days, you want to introduce the Modern Cities Act, is what you're calling it. And in part, you believe will end homelessness in 2 years in cities. That is a big promise that has been a vexing issue, particularly not just for Oakland, but California writ large. So how do you do that and keep a promise like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we have tools today that we've never had, specifically around technology, and it is quite troubling to see how our dollars have been spent in California alone. We can solve this crisis that we're having, in which people are becoming displaced due to mental illnesses, right? Drug addiction, economic hardship. And so part of the ambitious but doable goal of the Modern Cities Act, specifically around homelessness, is to open our mental health facilities that were closed decades ago, leaving many of our most vulnerable communities having to choose the streets, to pitch up a tent, to live in their cars, live in their families' homes. I am someone who, because I'm an underdog, has had to work harder as someone who worked full-time while running this campaign, ensuring that I have all of my issues when it comes to climate change, foreign affairs, immigration, the Modern Cities Act, homelessness, making sure that we understand, where is this funding coming from? What committee am I going to serve on? Working hard is not new to me, but making sure that people see that this is a fair fight, that this is a fight for them, that this is a fight where every voter should know who is it that is going to represent them. And if we see challenges in a candidate, then do we want to see more of that in Congress? And that's something that I am willing to fight for, because my voice is really representing not just the 700,000 plus constituents in this district, but the millions, hundreds of millions of people who are asking for fairness, asking for accountability and sensible solutions.
With so much at stake and so many races to cover, we are speaking to an expert about what to watch for. His take as we barrel towards the November general election. Welcome back. As voters mull their options, we asked Sonoma State political science professor David Mchan what people should be watching for as we brace for election season.
They should kind of strap and hold on. I mean, there's a couple of things here. One is that Donald Trump seems to be tapped out, have an upper limit of around 46 to 47%. This is in some ways similar to 2016, and we all might remember that race as being incredibly negative. So if you're tapped out, if you're at that place, if you have the courtroom as the campaign arena, which is what it will be in the near term, then you're going to have to go negative. And in the process of going negative, you're going to what we call demobilize people. You're going to turn people off. And so that means a lot of negativity. For Democrats, look, a Democrat has not received more than 54% of the popular vote since 1964. That means that Joe Biden has an upper limit as well. He will also get sanctioned because of the price of gas or the state of the economy or something going wrong in the Middle East or something going wrong in the United States itself, unforeseen circumstances or events. So be prepared for a close negative race. What that means is we're going to see a lot of polling. There's going to be a horse race. That's going to cover things. But voters have to kind of sit back. You pay attention to what's going on with likely voters, not registered voters. You pay attention to kind of holding on to your gut, if you will. What you think the sense of things is going on, what's going on with your pocketbook. All of this, despite what is happening with the travails of Donald Trump and his trials, despite what's going on with the White House. And then there's going to be these unforeseen events where you have to pivot. To what degree does the unconventional become the norm? That's what Donald Trump wants. And to what degree does the Biden team put forward a plan and then pivot?
We will continue to cover these major races and headlines as we approach Election Day. That wraps up this KTVU special, The Race to November. A reminder, you can watch this and our other programs on the Fox Local app. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.